Hi, everyone, and welcome to the lineup. Today is December 29th, 2022, just a few days away from flipping the calendar over to a new year. I'm Barry Stagner. I'm glad to be with you here this evening. And if you happen to catch it today, I made a little teaser for the program tonight and mentioned that we've got a special announcement, and that is regarding after Amir and I returned from the Philippines and after proximity on Saturday the 28th. And I encourage you, if you're in the area and would like to join us for the Proximity Conference, myself, Pastor Michael Lay, Amir Sarfati, and Jan Markell will be joining us via streaming from Minnesota. And you can go to cctustin.org and register there if you'd like to join us in person, or you can watch us online through these avenues, my Facebook page, the YouTube channel, The Truth About God, or you can watch on the Behold Israel platforms as well. And Calvary Chapel East Anaheim will be our host again this year, and they'll be streaming it from their website as well. So you've got multiple options to view the conference if you're unable to join us in person. And what we're going to be doing in a special announcement is this. On Sunday, the 29th of January, Amir and I are going to be doing kind of an update Q&A open session, and you're free to join online for that as well. So we'll have a special edition of the lineup on January 29th at 6 p.m. Pacific time, and we'd love to see you be a part of that. So with that said, let's jump into a set of very interesting stories this week. And as I continue to look at some of the things happening in our world, I'm just, again, amazed at the Bible's authority and accuracy and how we can trust in every word on every page that has been written, even if it was written millennia ago. And we're watching these things that the Bible has prophesied come to pass, or at least the elements that precede their fulfillment coming to pass. And things are lining up, as they say, and as our program is titled. And the first comes from the Jewish News Syndicate, and the headline reads, Netanyahu launches a 37th Israeli government. I promise to stop Iran and expand the circle of peace. Incoming Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu took to the podium at the Knesset on Thursday to launch his new government, announcing it would focus on three main goals. First, he said, it would prevent Iran from developing an arsenal of atomic weapons that will threaten us and the whole world. Second, it would develop Israel's infrastructure and deliver a flourishing economy to every part of Israel. And third, it would expand the circle of peace with Arab states with the goal of ending the Arab-Israeli conflict. Netanyahu also said that his government would restore personal security to Israel's citizens and sovereignty to the state of Israel, addressing fears that Israeli authority has eroded in areas where they are largely minority populations, including the Negev and Galilee. He said his government would address the rising cost of living and improve the education system for the good of all Israeli citizens. And occasionally being interrupted by cat calls from the opposition benches, Netanyahu said, I hear the opposition's eulogies about the end of the state, the end of democracy. Members of the opposition, to lose an election isn't the end of democracy. It's the essence of democracy. And I ask that you cease to rebel against the elected government. And following Netanyahu, outgoing Prime Minister Yair Lapid took to the podium to defend his government's record. Among its achievements, he said, was persuading through diplomatic efforts that were largely under the radar the Biden administration from returning to the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or the 2015 nuclear deal. And that's kind of a strange claim in light of the fact that the Biden administration kept wanting to sit down at the table with the Iranians, but so be it. Anyway, Netanyahu, now for the sixth time, is the prime minister of Israel and has formed a government and appointed cabinet members. Now, this hasn't made everyone happy, as we noted from the cat calls that were made during his speech, but All Israel News reports that, quote, here's the headline, new government guidelines cast vision of exclusive and inalienable right of the Jewish people to the land of Israel. With the 37th Israeli government getting ready to be sworn in, the bloc of nationalist and religious parties published its guiding principles, the general but non-binding goals of the coalition, on Wednesday. some 24 hours before its swearing in, as required by Israeli law. And the guidelines essentially cast the vision of the incoming coalition and indicate what the new ministers want to accomplish. In this case, the top point emphasizes the exclusive and inalienable right to all parts of the land of Israel for the Jewish people. That includes a goal of settlement building in internationally disputed territories such as the West Bank, also known as Judea and Samaria. The government also intends to continue its opposition to Iran's nuclear program, the third point on the list. And this is different from the coalition agreements that each of the parties signed, which includes demands and action items that will be carried out. Here's the translation of the principles of Israel's 37th government as translated by the Times of Israel. The government will act in accordance with the following guidelines. The Jewish people have an exclusive and inalienable right to all parts of the land of Israel. And the government will promote and develop the settlement of all parts of the land of Israel in the Galilee, the Negev, the Golan, and Judea and Samaria. Secondly, the government will actively work to boost national security, to provide personal security to its citizens, while resolutely and determinedly fighting violence and terrorism. The government will act to continue the struggle against Iran's nuclear program. The government will work to strengthen the status of Jerusalem. The government will work to promote peace with all our neighbors while preserving Israel's security, historical, and national interests. The government will aim for social justice by developing the periphery and reducing societal gaps, while uncompromisingly combating poverty through education, employment, increased assistance to the weaker segments of the population. The government will act to encourage the use of public transportation, advance a plan to deal with the soaring cost of living, review the option for reducing housing prices, taking steps to guarantee governance and restore the proper balance between the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary. And this has caused some angst among many judges who responded to this. And 78, I believe, is a number of retired judges who said that's a bad idea. And the government will preserve the Jewish character of the state and the heritage of Israel, and will respect the practices and traditions of members of all religions in the country in accordance with the values of the Declaration of Independence. The status quo on issues of religion and state will be preserved as it has been for decades in Israel, including with regard to the holy places. In other words, they're not going to do anything different on the Temple Mount than they have in the past, and the Jews will be banned from praying there, as will Christians. But Muslims who actually have no right to the Temple Mount are going to continue to be allowed to do so. Now, the Times of Israel is also reporting that bank bans credit for bigots as firms in Israel decry planned pro-discrimination laws. Now, in the midst of all that we just read a moment ago about the plans of this government, there are those who are viewing some of these steps and the promotion of the homeland that is specific to and exclusive to the Jewish right to the land and the right to expand, and all the questions that always come up, and the aggravation over settlements. And if you think about what we read in Zechariah chapter 12, verse 3, the reason I think these are important to the potential development of what's written in prophecy is because all the world is going to turn against Jerusalem in the end. And we've seen a huge move of Arab states toward establishing or normalizing ties, diplomatic relations with Israel. And things like this are often something that either brings a halt to or reverses those decisions when Israel does things like, we're going to build what we want in the West Bank, or tap into the resources in the Golan, or build in the Golan, these allegedly disputed territories. But in God's economy, there's nothing disputed about them. He gave them to the Jews as an everlasting covenant, promise and covenant as their own homeland. And he said he would bring them back into the land he gave them. So any efforts to uproot them, according to Amos 9:11, are not going to be successful. They will not be uprooted again once they come back into the land. So, but this again has the potential to cause problems in the international community because the world views this as disputed territory. Now, this story that I just read the headline to from the Times of Israel is interesting because of how it's framed. It's framed as hindering the ability to access a loan from a bank because of your position on one's sexual preferences. In other words, they're controlling the buying and selling to a limited degree, obviously, of those who don't agree with what they think the proper social construct ought to be in their society. Israeli tech firms and financial institutions are joining an effort started by the Israel Discount Bank to clearly voice their opposition to discrimination amid growing concern that the incoming coalition government will enact changes to allow the use of discriminatory practices. Israel Discount Bank on Sunday announced that its board of directors accepted a recommendation by the bank's management to update its credit policy to reflect that the lender will not grant credit to any business or organization that acts in a discriminatory manner or discriminates against customers on the basis of religion, race, gender, or sexual orientation. We found it appropriate to amend the bank's credit policy so that what is already obvious will now become official, said Israel Discount Bank Chairman Shaul Kobrinsky. According to the policy, Discount Bank will not grant credit to businesses or entities that discriminate against customers in the state of Israel. This is our commitment and responsibility as a significant business entity within the Israeli economy, Kobrinsky added. Discount Bank's statement comes in response to an apparent coalition agreement between the religious Zionism and Likud parties, which includes a clause stipulating that the incoming government will seek to amend discrimination laws to allow business owners to refuse to provide service if it violates their religious beliefs. The deal has yet to be officially signed. The law as it stands forbids discrimination by those providing public services or products on the basis of race, religion, gender, sexual orientation, or other similar considerations, and anyone doing so is liable to be fined. Now, there's the twist. And really what this is it's a setting up, and it's happening here in the United States and elsewhere around the world, but it's a setting up for the government determining what it is you can think, believe, and practice. And if you do anything against what the government says, then you can be fined or even, and the interesting thing is these are acts of discrimination on the part of this bank because of someone's religious belief, which they're violating the very thing they're saying the government intends to violate. And the truth is, we've seen, the stories here about bakers and florists who don't want to make a cake for a homosexual wedding, whether it be a gay wedding or a lesbian wedding. And, many of these cases, the people who have filed the lawsuits, the baker or the florist has provided flowers to them for other occasions or baked cakes for them for other occasions, birthday parties, etc., but did not want to violate their own conscience and what they believe is the right thing to do through biblical beliefs and not participate in the celebration of marriage, which the Bible says is according to God's will, one man and one woman. And now here we're redefining what a man and woman are in these last days. But what a mess we're in. Did you ever think that something so kooky would actually become an issue that you could actually get in trouble, be fined, or even jailed for saying, men can't have babies? And this is the age we live in. And now here you've got this move, which is going to reach its ultimate fulfillment during the tribulation period. But you've got this move to determine what people think and use their financial abilities to do business as a strong arm to push them into the thinking of the culture of the day. And again, it's not, and I think I just need to say this because it's just such a bizarre thing that we're all experiencing today. Listen, you can believe that homosexuality is wrong without hating them. I believe lying is wrong, but I don't hate every liar because I'd have to hate everybody because everybody's lied, or anything else. And you can believe that adultery or fornication is wrong without hating someone. And you can love somebody and be passionate towards them and care about their soul and believe that the practices that they are engaging in are things that put their soul in peril. That's not hating them. That's just keeping a biblical perspective on moral issues. And yet, here, this is rising to the surface because of the new government that was elected and now is going to be sworn in and be put into power. Now, this is an interesting website. It's called the New Tang Dynasty, and it's people that have come out of China and established a news website to report on things going on around the world because they have seen what controlling the narrative could be like under communism. And so they want to make sure that information is getting out there. I did a lot of research on this page before I ever used anything they wrote or even quoted their name. But the New Tang Dynasty reports Twitter files show shocking level of government overreach and abuse, according to Kash Patel. A Trump-era Pentagon official believes that the amount the FBI actually paid to Twitter to censor free speech is 10 times higher than the $3.5 million that was revealed in a recent installment of the Twitter files, and that lawmakers in Congress should keep digging to uncover hidden ties between government and big tech. Kash Patel, who served as the Pentagon's chief of staff to acting Defense Secretary Christopher Miller under the administration of then-President Donald Trump, said on a recent episode of Epic TV's Cash's Corner that the latest Twitter files disclosures paint a picture of a shocking level of government overreach and abuse. Patel was referring to the revelations shared by independent journalist Michael Schellenberger, who posted screenshots of internal Twitter messages that show there was a long-standing influence campaign by the FBI around the time the New York Post released its report on Hunter Biden's laptop. The messages shared by Schellenberger show that the FBI paid Twitter around $3.4 million between October 2019 and February of 2021 for, quote, law enforcement, end quote, related projects, including the LE training, tooling, etc. And the FBI, according to Schellenberger, would also target media articles on alleged foreign influence operations that Twitter would then investigate and debunk. Those probes, however, repeatedly revealed very little Russian activity, he said. Elon Musk took over Twitter in October and facilitated the release of the Twitter files in a bid to shed light on the social media platform's censorious practices and transform it into a space free of political bias. Musk commented on Schellenberger's Twitter files report saying government paid Twitter millions of dollars to censor info from the public. And in a response to a question by the Epic Times whether the FBI colluded with major tech companies, including Twitter, to censor information ahead of the 2020 election, the agency said it only provided information and didn't push companies to take any specific actions. And the FBI told the Epic Times in an emailed statement that the agency regularly engages with private sector entities to provide information specific to identified foreign malign influence actors, subversive, undeclared covert, or criminal activities. It is not based on the content of any particular message or narrative. And boy, there's a lie. Private sector entities independently make decisions about what, if any, action they take on their platforms and for their customers after the FBI has notified them, the agency said. And again, controlling the narrative anytime that you have, a socialistic type government or communistic type government, you will find phrases like, and quotes coming from them about the state run media, the government's media outlet arm. And, these are the things, state-run media, these are the kind of phrases that you would see. And now we're seeing that influence here in the United States to where this very thing, which is essential to advancing the socialist communist agenda that's manifesting itself here in the United States, they have to control the narrative. They have to control what's being said out there. And we are hearing story after story of some of the things that were misrepresented and the flat-out lies regarding the pandemic and even the jabs that were being circulated and promoted by government entities, and the fact that they were never researched for stopping transmission, and they did nothing to avert infection. I'm not sure what they were for then, other than, well, I am sure what they're for, but I think it's just, again, another piece of government control. And now we're just seeing this rampant around the world. And the next story comes from a website called The Dossier. The headline reads, World Economic Forum cancels Twitter, directs followers to Chinese social media apps. And the World Economic Forum and the Chinese Communist Party are close allies. And prior to the upcoming conference in Davos next month, the World Economic Forum appears to have joined the cancel campaign against Twitter, taking to recommending Chinese state-controlled social media apps to follow along with Davos man into the future. The Dossier is a reader-supported publication. Just for your information, I should have deleted that from the article, sorry. But Twitter is noticeably absent from the entities listed on the organization's How to Follow Davos 2023 social media pamphlet, and that appears to be no accident. To stay up to speed with all that's happening within the invite-only doors of the ruling class confab, the World Economic Forum recommends following along through a handful of social media sites. They include the US-based narrative-compliant Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and YouTube, along with the Chinese social media apps, TikTok, WeChat, and Weibo. And Twitter has freed itself from the grasp of the World Economic Forum, endorsed censorship-compliant social apps, and is no longer included. Through its founder, Klaus Schwab, and partner organizations, the World Economic Forum has a very cozy relationship with the Chinese government. Davos recently revealed that their China office now has 40 full-time staffers. And moreover, every year in Beijing, the World Economic Forum hosts its annual meeting of the new champions, which facilitates partnerships between international businesses and Chinese Communist Party. In 2018, the CCP awarded Klaus Schwab with its China Reform Friendship Medal, a medal for non-Chinese people who do the CCP's bidding overseas. And Davos in 2023 will feature Xu Zichu, the CEO of TikTok, on stage. First reported by the Dossier, he will appear at an event titled Tackling Harm in the Digital Era. In other words, restricting those who don't go along with the flow of the global narrative that is advancing the prophetic narrative quite clearly into the place where we'll see it on an unprecedented scale, obviously, during the tribulation period, where all buying and selling is going to be monitored and governed by whether or not you choose to take a mark. And just think about all the things that we've been seeing just recently that are pushing this and advancing this forward. You know, we heard during the lockdowns and the big push for taking the jab, you know, that there were those who were calling for the restriction of giving health care to people who weren't compliant, and the refusal of allowing people into different restaurants and eateries and stores, and they had to prove that they had taken the jab. And again, you know, all of the things, the repercussions we're seeing around the world are just astronomical. And what's happening with children that are now born to vaccinated women and things of that nature, you can do a lot of research there. It's just incredible to see what's happening in our world today. And Breitbart, along the same lines of our last story, says the Great Reset. German government wants to remote control home heat and electric car charge. A government agency in Germany has announced a new scheme that will see power suppliers able to remotely limit home heating and electric car charging. Germany's Federal Network Agency, a government watchdog responsible for the regulation of electricity and gas in the country, has announced a new plan that will allow power grid operators to remotely limit the use of heat pumps and electric car chargers in Germany next winter without the user's permission. Here in Southern California, a few years back, SCNE, the power company here in SoCal, went around and installed new meters on everybody's houses. And they're digital meters that they can control, and they don't have to come out to shut your power off or flip a switch. They can do it from their headquarters, and monitoring everything that you do, again, as it has to do with your usage. And getting, you know, it just cracks me up in a sad way. Every month I get my usage report printed on paper and mailed out from the power company about how much power that we used. And so, you know, they're all concerned about, using natural resources or generated resources, and yet they're wasting ink, paper, and postage to send me something that means absolutely nothing because every month it says about the same as last month. Of course, in the summer months, it reads a little differently because we have to run the air here. But just what a crazy, mixed up, messed up world we live in. And this government agency wants to do basically the same thing. We want to limit the use of heat pumps and electric car chargers by next winter. And with the plans set to be put in place by January 2024, the measure has been described as a way of ensuring energy grid operators have the ability to artificially curb electricity demand should consumption outstrip supply. And according to a report on the new scheme penned by the plan has been drawn up in response to the German energy grid being put under more and more strain by an increasing number of electric car chargers and people using more environmentally friendly but electricity intense heat pumps in their home. Such an increased demand reportedly cannot be caught up to with increased supply, at least in the short term, meaning the authorities within the Federal Network Agency believe that remote consumption restrictions must be rolled out on certain devices. Well, maybe it's just me, but I'm thinking maybe more power plants would be in order instead of wasting money on tracking and shutting down everybody's power supply, if that were the real concern. But of course, control is what they're after, and controlling the masses and having them bow to whatever it is that the government agencies say. That's the end game, even if they're unaware of it, and even if it's under, the guise and even well intended. Now, the fact is that government control is what's advancing in these last days, and it's going, as I said, to reach its zenith under the first beast of Revelation chapter 13. Now, Vox is reporting that winter storms put the U.S. power grid to the test, and it failed. Two-thirds of the U.S. population faced snowstorms, high winds, or frigid winter weather over the Christmas holiday weekend, leading to at least 52 deaths and pushing the electricity grid to the brink of failure. And in many instances, it did fail. At its peak on Christmas, an estimated 1.7 million businesses and homes faced power outages. It was the coldest Christmas in recent memory, and that meant a predictable surge in heating demand as temperatures dropped. The Tennessee Valley Authority, which provides power for over 10 million people, said demand was running nearly 35% higher than on a typical winter day. In many states, utilities and grid operators only narrowly averted greater disaster by asking customers to conserve their energy or prepare for rolling blackouts when a utility voluntarily but temporarily shuts down electrical power to avoid the entire system shutting down. Some of the largest operators, including the Tennessee Valley Authority, Duke Energy, used rolling blackouts throughout the weekend. Others, like National Grid, experienced some outages and asked some consumers to reduce gas usage. Texas also barely got through the emergency. On Friday, the U.S. Department of Energy permitted the state to ignore environmental emission standards to keep the power on. And one transmission company that regulators thought would be well prepared for the winter storm was caught off guard. PJM Interconnection, which serves 65 million people in 13 eastern states, faced triple the power plant outages than it expected. And officials probably could have met the higher demand if not for another predictable event that overwhelmed the system. Because of the extreme conditions, coal and gas plants and pipelines froze up too, taking them out of commission to deliver energy in areas that run mostly on gas. And the events over Christmas show how utilities and regulators continue to overestimate the reliability of fossil fuels to deliver power in a winter storm. They had to get that in there. And it wasn't that the country didn't have enough gas to go around to meet the high demand. There was plenty of gas, but the infrastructure proved vulnerable to the extreme weather. Enough wells and pipes were frozen or broken to bring the grid to its brink. And again, as I said a moment ago, we do not see a scramble to build power plants all over the country. And, right here in the United States, or here in Southern California, I should say, just a couple of years ago, there were efforts to build a desalination plant here along the coast, and the environmentalists shut it down. because of its environmental impact. The only environmental impact that a desalination plant has is it pumps salt back into the ocean, which is already filled with salt. And so it's just stupid. I don't know what else to say. Just the mentality today is just beyond bizarre. And, I've been working on a message for the proximity conference, and we're going to talk about a lot of these things, the deception and delusion that's rampant in our world today. And so, again, hope you can join us. If you're in the local area, again, go to cctustin.org if you'd like to sign up, or you can jump online. Now, here's another story, and I think these are worthy of mention just because of the potential that they have to create a catastrophic environment. And this is about power again, but it comes from Zero Hedge. And the headline says 3 power substations attacked in Washington state on Christmas Day. Now, we just talked about this like 3 weeks ago that this was happening, and some saw it as kind of a test run. And can you imagine those who are enemies of the United States coming in? And like we read a moment ago, that one power source that handles 65 million people, imagine cutting them off from supplying their customers with energy in the midst of a record-breaking freeze or something like that. The number of deaths would be catastrophic. And so now, here we've got on Christmas Day, 3 more power substations attacked in Washington state. 2 of the power substations were operated by Tacoma Public Utilities and 1 by Puget Sound Energy. In the first 8 months of the year, there were 106 attacks on the electrical grid, the highest number ever recorded in a single year. And increased sabotage incidents on the U.S. power grid are very concerning. On Christmas Day, 3 substation facilities were vandalized in Pierce County, Washington, plunging thousands of customers into total darkness. 2 of the power substations were operated by Tacoma Utilities and 1 by Puget Sound. Puget Sound, as we read a moment ago. And the Pierce County Sheriff's Department said all 3 were attacked, but there are no motives or if this was a coordinated attack on the power systems. The Sheriff's Office said nothing was stolen from the substations while equipment was only vandalized. There was no mention of what devices were damaged or the tool to inflict damage. Unfortunately, the impacts to our system from today's deliberate damage are more severe in some places than initial testing indicated. Some customers will be restored closer to 8 a.m. tomorrow, Tacoma Public Utilities wrote in a statement on Sunday. The Tacoma substation attacks followed deliberate attacks on 2 power substations in North Carolina earlier this month. That's the story I mentioned a moment ago that we covered. Duke Energy personnel found bullet holes in transformers. We've asked the question of who is intentionally sabotaging the U.S. power grid in the first 8 months of the year. Again, 106 attacks on the power grid, the highest number ever recorded in a single year. Well, let's see, who would want to bring us down? Well, we've got all types of people who are opposed to us. We've got basically open borders, people coming into our country who actually hate our country and come into our country to bring it down. And sadly, we've got a lot of people who are born and raised here who hate our country and would like nothing more than to see our country implode and be taken over by a socialist, communistic type government, where in their minds, the government takes care of us and provides everything. It's never worked. It never will work. It will be a disaster if it comes here, just like in Venezuela and Cuba. Now, Today News UK, here's our final story for the day, but I thought this was interesting, and it's a follow-up to a story we reported on a couple of weeks ago. Could a zombie virus frozen in mammoth remains leak from a Russian lab and spark a new pandemic? Russian researchers are unearthing the bodies of long-dead mammals in an attempt to reawaken Stone Age viruses. Such viruses are thought to have remained dormant for millennia in the frozen remains of mammoths, woolly rhinoceros, and other extinct species in northeast Siberia. Like the virus that caused COVID-19, these prehistoric paleoviruses are unfamiliar to the human body, and were they to ever find their way across the species barrier, a catastrophe would follow. We would, after all, have no natural defense. For biologists, the mammoths seem to hold an enduring fascination. Last year, a project called Colossal was launched, aiming to tweak the genetic code of the mammoth's closest living relative, the Asian elephant, to create a hybrid animal that could survive in the Arctic Circle. The latest project, carried out by Russia's State Research Center of Virology and Biotechnology, known as Vector, aims to extract cellular material containing the viruses that killed these frozen beasts and take it back to the lab for experimentation. What could possibly go wrong? To conjure up the all too real nightmare scenario, you only have to hear the history of Vector. The idea of Russian scientists meddling with long dormant mammal infecting viruses has caused alarm among international experts. And one of the research center's branches is a former biological weapons facility, which in 1979, during the Soviet era, accidentally released spores of deadly anthrax bacteria. The resulting anthrax outbreak killed 66 people, though Soviet authorities denied for years that the incident even happened. Today, Vector hosts one of the 59 maximum security biolabs around the world. Another is China's Wuhan Institute of Virology, widely suspected of inadvertently unleashing COVID-19. Vector's track record of lethal mishaps also includes an incident in 2004 when a researcher died after pricking herself accidentally with a needle carrying the Ebola virus. The idea of Russian scientists meddling with long dormant mammal infecting viruses has caused alarm among international experts, such as Jean Michel Claverie, a professor of microbiology at the University of Marseille in France. And last month, Claverie revealed that his team had itself revived the Siberian zombie virus that had lain frozen under a lake bed for almost 50,000 years. That's the story we reported. But in Claverie's case, for safety's sake, he insists that his work is focused solely on viruses that can infect only single-celled amoeba rather than threatening animals or indeed humans. Vector's research is terrible. I'm totally against it, he said. It is very, very risky. Our immune systems have never encountered these types of viruses. Some of them could be 200,000 or even 400,000 years old, but ancient viruses that affected animals or humans could still be infectious, that which is frozen in the permafrost. Vector, State Research Center of Virology and Biotechnology, said, I would not be very confident that everything is up to date, even though their claims say everything is perfectly safe. Even if the Russians could be trusted to not let loose a virus, we have other reasons to fear that something nasty will come for us from the Arctic's frozen waste. This is because the permafrost, vast swaths of permanently frozen ground is no longer permanent. Thanks to global warming, it is melting, and from it may emerge deadly old infectious foes. And this really isn't science fiction, it's happened already. 8 years ago, Russia's far north experienced abnormally mild summer temperatures. Soon afterwards, 72 people from a community of nomadic reindeer herders, including 41 children, were hospitalized with infections. The culprit was anthrax, though this time not from a Russian bioweapons lab, but from human and animal remains buried in the thawing permafrost. A 12-year-old boy died. We literally fought for the life of each person, but the infection showed its cunning, said the governor of the affected Yamal area, Dmitry Kobolikhin. Anthrax disease, which is known locally as the Siberian plague, had not been seen in the region since 1941. Now, remember, Jesus said, just like with the wars and rumors of war, ethnic tensions, famine, earthquakes, and all the other things that will progress in a birth pang-like progression leading up to the tribulation where they reach their ultimate fulfillment. He mentioned pestilence or plagues. And could this be what leads to another pandemic, something like this? Now, let me just say this. The permafrost is melting because the Earth's weather systems cycle. And we've had other ice ages in the past, and the polar caps have been larger and smaller throughout the history of the world. And, this is just a normal process of how the world itself, or the Earth itself, I should say, operates. So whether it's global warming, which it isn't, the world, at least man-made or man-induced, it is happening, and the world is warming, and we're in a season now, it seems, to where the temperatures are more mild, especially in places with extreme weather like Siberia. And the interesting thing that makes this article noteworthy, I think, is what the article goes on to say regarding that. And average temperatures have increased by up to 1 degree centigrade in northern Russia over the past 15 years. And the climate is warmer now and thawing the permafrost that covers much of the country, including, and here's what's interesting, cemeteries and animal burial grounds. The floodwaters produced by the thawing permafrost, also erode river banks where nomads bury their dead. And it is from such cadavers that zombie anthrax spores are awakening. Not could awaken, but are awakening, because these cadavers are being released from the permafrost as it melts, and anthrax spores are awakening. And anthrax spores can survive in frozen human and animal remains for hundreds of years, waiting to be released, according to Alex Corcoran, head of the Climate and Energy Program for the World Wildlife Fund in Russia. And viruses from these remains can then infect groundwater that people drink. Indeed, the Siberian boy who died in 2014 had an intestinal form of the disease, which causes fever, stomach pains, diarrhea, and vomiting. Now, what other deadly contagions might be lying in wait for us? In 2005, NASA revived bacteria that had been locked in Alaska permafrost for more than 12,000 years. Other scientists have recovered genetic material from diseases such as smallpox, the 1918 Spanish flu, and even the bubonic plague. In fact, human remains exhumed from frozen ground in Alaska in 1997 have yielded the complete genome of the 1918 H1N1 influenza virus that killed tens of millions. Just unbelievable to read a story like this and to consider that somebody would actually consider weaponizing this. And isn't it interesting that Russia is in the crosshairs of almost every nation in the world, except for China, of course. And their invasion of Ukraine has put them in a soured light, even in the eyes of the United Nothing, or the United Nations, rather. And it wouldn't be a surprise to see them do something extreme and radical, and to weaponize one of these viruses and let it loose on the rest of the world, because they have, like the Iranians have and others have, a view or a hope, rather, of controlling the world. And again, this is all leading up to what the Antichrist is going to do, or the first piece of Revelation chapter 13. So again, just considering all the things that we see happening in the world, the distrust for government, the dislike of government, the demands that the government control the thoughts of people, and that everything be acceptable, and those who are not accepting of what the social or cultural norm is be limited in their abilities to conduct business. All of these things are spokes on a wheel that will lead to the ultimate fulfillment of what's going to happen during the tribulation period. Now, I think it's worth mentioning that we need to remember all the time that we do not have an appointment with the wrath of God. We will not see any of the tribulation period, simply because, one, it's the 70th week of Daniel, and two, the church wasn't present for the first 69 weeks of the 70 of Daniel, and we will not be present for the 70th week of Daniel. It's a biblical necessity, prophetic necessity, that the church be removed so the Antichrist can rise to power. It can't happen as long as we're still here. So with things moving and advancing forward as quickly as they are, the things we mentioned at the outset, and Israel allowing businesses that are owned by Orthodox Jews to say, well, we're not going to conduct business with the homosexual community, is obviously going to put Israel in a very unfavorable light with the rest of the world, who is advancing, sadly, in the wrong direction on these fronts, and continue to advance the global anti-Semitism that is on a rise at a pace unprecedented in history. So, but we, again, we're going to meet the Lord in the air and be instantly and permanently, supernaturally translated into immortal incorruptibility. Philippians 3:20 says we're going to put on a glorious body like that of Jesus' body. Won't it be great to never be sick again and never have to worry about viruses again, and live in a realm where death is not allowed? And I love what Revelation says in chapter 21, about in the New Jerusalem, there will not be anything in it ever that causes an abomination or a lie. It will be a city of purity, like we will never see on this earth, even during the millennial reign of Christ on earth. There's still going to be sin, because humans are going to be born, and they're born with a sin nature. But in the New Jerusalem, it's going to be absolute perfection forever and ever and ever. Amen. So, looking forward to that day. And that day, I'm sad to say, to a degree, is about 1,000 years away, 1,007 maybe. And when we see the New Jerusalem, but once we go to be with the Lord, we're going to forever be with him. When he comes back, we're coming back with him. When he defeats the invading armies of Gog and Magog at the end of the millennial reign, we'll be with him. When the New Jerusalem descends down to the earth, we'll be with him. We will forever be with the Lord. What a great promise that is. So, in the midst of all the heavy stuff we talk about and all the things that are happening in our world, that is why the rapture of the church is called the blessed hope. And the blessed hope is the glorious appearing of our great God and Savior, Jesus Christ. Not the return, but the glorious appearing. Because when he returns, he'll be in his full glory, but he'll be on a war horse. And he will be wearing a robe that is dipped in blood. And his name is called the Word of God. And his eyes will be like a flame of fire. That's when he comes back. But his glorious appearing is to meet the dead in Christ and the living saints in the air, that we will forever be with him. So always keep that in mind, even as we talk about this heavy stuff. And, Paul said, hey, last days are going to be perilous. Men will be lovers of themselves, haters of God, belligerent, traitors, headstrong, haughty, all these other things, and having a form of godliness but denying its power. And, that form of godliness, that word morphosis, form, means to be born out of something that previously existed. And I believe that's consistent with what Paul said in 2 Timothy chapter 4 about the time when men will not endure sound doctrine. So there's going to be something, I believe we can make the case to say, that's called the church. It's not the church in the last days, and it will not actually have a love of the truth, and it will not share the accurate gospel. And that's happening all around us today as well. So Jesus is coming for us soon, and looking forward to a new year, however much of it we're going to be here for. I say that every year, but I should. We don't know how long we're going to be here. The Lord may take us home. I'm always for the group plan. I don't want to go in the individual plan. I want to go with all y'all to be with the Lord forever, simultaneously, in a moment and a twinkling of an eye. So for this December 29th, 2022, that's it. Again, I'm Barry Stagner. And remember, on the 29th, please pray for Amir and I. He's headed to Vietnam and then Singapore on January 2nd. And then I'm headed out on January 8th to meet him in the Philippines. And we've got a series of events, I think 6 events in 12 days or 14 days, something like that, 6 major events. And those events, some of them are 2-day events. Others are all-day events. Our first event is on January 11th at a church. We just got word, Amir just told me a couple of days ago that we were thinking it was a Wednesday night event. It'll be a church setting and all of that, which it is at a church, but there's 3,000 people coming. So, and they've invited 500 pastors, and 90% of the population in the Philippines is Catholic. So we're hoping there's a lot of Catholics there who are going to hear the truth about the last days. Amir and I each will be speaking, so we covet and appreciate your prayers. And then we come back. I'm back on the 24th. He's back. He's here in the States on the 25th, and then Proximity is on the 28th, and then on the 29th we'll be together at Calvary Chapel, Tustin. So with that said, and by the way, keep praying for Bible Prophecy, The Essentials. We haven't hit the number yet, but we're getting closer every day. And thank you so much for everybody who's supported and purchased the book. I know that's a lot to ask. I mean, the strain and stress and everything, but we're so grateful for all who have purchased the book. And like we mentioned last week, Target's going to carry it. So we're hoping for the rest of the folks to actually put it on the shelf and not just offer it in their online stores. And thanks for supporting this effort. So with that said, that's it for me. And you know how it goes. We'll see you here, there, or in the air. God bless you.